The house in Denver was comfortably warm, set at a steady 70 degrees, but at the dinner table, it felt like everything had frozen over. My brother Ryan didn't even look up from his plate when he said it. Megan needs her own space to grow her brand. A content studio. My mother, Cynthia, gave her usual bobbing nod, agreeing with him before he had even finished the sentence. That meant the unfinished basement where I had been sleeping on a cot beside the water heater would no longer be mine. They needed the space for storage, of course. You need to be out by New Year's, Ryan added, voice cold. It wasn't a request. It was an eviction notice, served over Christmas dinner. Before I went downstairs, I forced a smile and looked at them, taking in the festive atmosphere. It was as if I was a ghost in my own home, unnoticed, even as they carved the Christmas ham and laughed about their plans for the coming year. I walked down the stairs, leaving the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon behind. The air felt colder with each step I took, until I could see my breath puffing out in small white clouds. My room wasn't really a room at all. It was a half-finished basement in a 70s Denver house, raw concrete floors and exposed insulation that looked like pink cotton candy, but smelled of dust and decay. It was freezing down there, and the only source of warmth was the water heater I'd been sleeping next to, wrapped in a wool blanket for comfort that didn't quite exist. I collapsed onto my cot, unlacing my work boots. My back screamed with tension, a constant reminder of how I spent my days. I'm a physical therapist. For 12 hours a day, I carry the weight of others' trauma. I lift stroke victims and teach accident survivors how to walk again. But the moment I clock out, I come home to sleep on a camping cot, my only companion the hum of the water heater. It hadn't always been like this. 6 months ago, Ryan and his wife, Megan, moved in. It was supposed to be temporary, just a pit stop while Ryan launched his latest business venture. They took the master bedroom immediately, of course. Ryan needed the ensuite bathroom for his morning meditation, and Megan needed the natural light for her social media presence. So, without much discussion, I was relegated to the basement. Please like this video and listen to my story until the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Your support means the world to me, and I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. As I sat on my cot, staring at the cold glow of the water heater's pilot light, I couldn't help but think back to when I used to wonder if they hated me. I used to torture myself, wondering what I had done to deserve being pushed aside like this. But tonight, something clicked. I realized that they didn't hate me. That would require passion. It would require acknowledgement. No, this was something colder, something more silent, more insidious. I was like the foundation of the house, always there, holding everything up, but completely invisible. In architecture, the foundation supports everything, yet because it's buried underground, no one ever notices it. It doesn't get praise. It doesn't get thanked. It just holds up the roof until it cracks. I had become invisible to my own family. They didn't see me as a sister or a daughter anymore. I was just the wall they leaned on, the support beam they took for granted. They didn't realize the house couldn't stand without me. They didn't know that I had been carrying them all along, paying the bills, keeping the roof over our heads, even as they treated me like an inconvenience. But all of that was about to change. There was a shift coming, a moment when I would stop holding everything up for them, and I wasn't sure what the fallout would be. Could I really let it all go? Could I finally walk away? Stay tuned for the next part of my story. You won't want to miss what happens next. I sat in the dim light of the basement, wrapped in my blanket, wondering how long I could keep this up. The cold concrete floor beneath me seeped into my bones, and I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. My mother, Cynthia, believed in ghosts. Specifically, she believed in the ghost of my father's pension. She thought it was his way of still taking care of her, even though he'd been gone for years. But that wasn't the reality. I was the one who had been paying the bills for as long as I could remember. I had stepped in when my dad's pension ran dry 5 years ago, after the fund administrator sent us that final, soul-crushing letter. I chose silence. I told myself it was to protect her. To keep her pride intact, to prevent her from knowing that the man she had idolized hadn't left her anything. But silence comes at a cost. I buried myself in my work. Extra shifts, skipping vacations, driving a rickety old car that rattled when it idled. I did it all without complaint because I thought I was protecting my mother's dignity. But every time I did something for her, every time I paid for groceries or covered the mortgage, I felt smaller. Like a ghost of my own. It was around the holidays that I finally understood the price of the life I was living. The silence had gone too far. It hadn't protected her, it had erased me. I thought about the money I was still funneling into that family account, the $1,100 for the mortgage, the $1,000 for the pharmacy. Every month without fail. And they didn't know. They didn't see the invisible weight I was carrying, keeping everything from falling apart. They didn't see me, the real me, the one who was still paying for their comfort, their luxury. I tapped the screen of my phone, staring at the automatic payments scheduled for the first of the month. My thumb hovered over the cancel button. For a split second, I considered what might happen if I just stopped. What if I didn't make the payments? What if I finally said no? I'm curious, how many of you have ever been in a position where you were giving so much, yet felt like nobody truly saw you? Drop a comment below and share your story. If you've ever felt invisible, or like you were carrying everyone else's weight, you're not alone. The thought of canceling those payments hit me like a brick. I imagined the chaos, the calls from the bank, the delivery notices for oxygen tanks, the pharmacy calling to ask why the bills weren't paid. The whole facade would come crashing down, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But then, I thought about Ryan's words earlier that evening, at the dinner table. Megan needed a content studio. Ryan needed space to grow his business. They needed everything, and I was the one left paying for it all. I had been the invisible infrastructure for so long, and now I was just invisible. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to let myself fall apart under the weight of their expectations. But I couldn't keep carrying them anymore. I had to make a choice. I had to stop being the foundation. I had to step away and let everything fall apart if that's what it took. The phone screen stared back at me, its glowing light too bright in the dim basement. And I made a decision. I pressed cancel. It wasn't going to be easy. I wasn't sure what would happen next. But something inside me had shifted. I had made my first choice for me, and I wasn't going to let guilt or fear drag me back. But when I woke up the next morning, I had no idea the storm that was about to hit. The truth was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. The morning after I hit cancel, I woke up with a strange, unsettling peace. The weight that had been bearing down on me for so long had lifted, even just a little. I had stopped playing the role of the invisible provider. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was suffocating under their expectations. But as the day went on, reality began to sink in. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, vibrating relentlessly, one notification after another. It was like a strobe light of panic flashing in my face. I hesitated before picking it up, not sure I was ready for the storm that was brewing on the other side of the screen. First, there was a voicemail from the medical supply company. The portable oxygen tanks had been put on hold. The account was 30 days past due. Then came an email from the bank. The mortgage payment had bounced. Insufficient funds. I could feel the ground under my feet start to shift, the instability creeping in. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I was already starting to feel the first tremors of the fallout. Then came Ryan's messages. It wasn't a brother checking in on his sister. It wasn't even a "Hey, are you okay?" It was pure fury, wrapped in business jargon, like I was just an employee who had failed to do their job. Words like unacceptable and misappropriation popped up on my screen. He wasn't asking how I was doing. He was screaming at me, demanding answers, calling me negligent for letting the family business fall apart. He was accusing me of embezzling from our father's pension, as if I was the one who had drained the account. And there it was, the lie that had kept everything afloat. Ryan and Megan, they thought they were living off of Dad's legacy. They thought they were entitled to it because they were family. They didn't see me. They didn't see the person who had been paying every single bill, every single month, for years. Has anyone here ever been accused of something that wasn't true, but still had to deal with the consequences? Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with a toxic family dynamic, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. I stared at the texts, my pulse steady despite the storm inside me. Ryan didn't get it. He couldn't see the truth. I was no longer the person who had been keeping everything together. I wasn't his secretary. I wasn't his ATM. I was the one who had been carrying the weight of our family's dysfunction on my shoulders, and now he was treating me like I had betrayed them. The more I read, the more I realized something. They still didn't know. They still didn't see the truth. And I wasn't going to let them keep treating me like a ghost. I thought about the email I had sent them weeks ago, the one they had all ignored. I pulled it up on my phone and attached the image of the letter from the pension fund administrator. The truth. I didn't even write a paragraph. I didn't explain myself. I didn't defend my character. I just attached the letter and hit send. I watched the delivered notification pop up, and then I waited. The 3 little dots of typing appeared on my screen. And then they disappeared. A minute later, Ryan's reply came through. It wasn't a response that said, "Oh, I get it now." No. It was pure denial. "Stop gaslighting us with fake documents," he wrote. "Put the money back in the account or I'm calling the police. You're embezzling from Dad's legacy." I read the message again, trying to wrap my mind around it. Even after seeing the proof, he still refused to believe it. And that's when I realized it wasn't about the money. It was about the myth they had created, the delusion they had been living in. They thought my father's pension was still there, still supporting them. But it was never there. Not anymore. But this wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. Ryan and Megan had no idea what was really happening, and the truth was about to hit them hard. It was time for them to see the consequences of their actions. Stay tuned to find out how I finally broke free from their world, and how they responded when the lies shattered. The silence after I hit send was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt something like calm. The truth was out there. There was no more pretending, no more lies. My family might not get it yet, but I was no longer hiding behind the weight of their delusions. I went about my day, quietly, almost detached from the chaos unfolding around me. The phone kept buzzing, but I didn't pick it up. I didn't care. I had done what I needed to do. The moment I'd been avoiding for so long had arrived, and now, there was no turning back. But it wasn't long before the knock came. It was soft at first, hesitant. Then it came again, more insistent. I knew who it was before I even opened the door. Ryan. Megan. And my mother. I stood there, my hand on the door handle, my heart strangely steady. I wasn't sure what I was about to face, but I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to be the one to cave this time. I opened the door to find them standing there in the hallway. Ryan was still in the wrinkled suit from the bank, his tie loosened, his face pale. Megan stood behind him, shivering in a coat that was too thin for the cold. And my mother, she sat in her transport chair, clutching a blanket, her portable oxygen tank hissing with a dying rattle. It was like the world was turning in slow motion. They looked so small, so broken. They had nowhere to go, no safety net to fall back on. They looked at me like I was their last hope, like I was still the one who could make everything right. But I wasn't that person anymore. Ryan stepped forward first, his eyes wide with desperation. We don't have anywhere to go," he said, his voice shaking, but with a note of manipulation I couldn't ignore. "Mom's struggling to breathe. Just help us now. We'll fix the paperwork later, I promise." I didn't let them in. Instead, I turned and walked to the small table by the door, where I had prepared for this moment. I picked up a folder and walked back to him. I handed it to him, and he opened it, his face unreadable as he scanned the contents. It wasn't a check. It wasn't money. It wasn't a reinstatement of the payments. It was a spreadsheet, rows and rows of black ink turned red. Every mortgage payment, every pharmacy bill, every utility bill. And at the bottom, in bold, underlined text, $110,000. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you help them or stand your ground? If you've ever had to make a tough choice like this, share your story. You're not alone in facing difficult decisions. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of reclaiming your life and standing up for yourself. Ryan stared at the number for what felt like an eternity. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. He looked from the paper to me, then back again, as if he was searching for some kind of mistake, some way out of this. But there was no mistake. No glitch in the system. I didn't need to say anything. The truth was right there in front of him. I looked at my mother, who was wheezing slightly, her hand clutching her blanket. For years, I had been the invisible foundation of her life, the one who kept everything together while they lived in their fantasy world. But now that I had stepped out from the shadows, the whole thing was collapsing. The roof had fallen in, and they were left standing in the wreckage. Ryan's eyes darted between the spreadsheet and me, but there was nothing left to say. And then, I spoke the words I had been holding back for so long. "Dad didn't leave you a pension," I told her. "He left you with debt and a foreclosure notice 5 years ago. I was the pension. I was the legacy. I've been the one paying for everything." It felt like the ground was shifting beneath me, like I had just dropped a bombshell. The look on my mother's face was one of pure shock. She didn't understand. She didn't know that the comfort she had been living in had been bought with my suffering. That the pride she had clung to for all these years had been a lie. I paused for a moment, letting the words sink in, and then I said the final thing that shattered our family's illusion. "When you sat at that dinner table and nodded while they evicted me to the basement, you didn't just kick out a daughter. You kicked out your pension." There was a long silence. It wasn't the silence of contemplation. It was the silence of realization, the kind of silence that comes when a worldview shatters. My mother made a small, choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth as the shame hit her. I saw it in her eyes, the understanding that the dignity she had clung to for so long wasn't hers. It was mine. I had been the one giving everything, and she had never seen it. I reached for the table again and picked up a second piece of paper. It was a list of state-subsidized care facilities within a 50-mile radius. I placed it on top of the spreadsheet in Ryan's hands. "Since you're the man of the house now," I said, "you can start making some calls." I didn't offer any apologies. I didn't offer any excuses. I didn't even offer curses. I just stepped back and closed the door. That was it. The final blow. I had done it. I had let the truth come out, and now, I was no longer part of their world. But I wasn't sure if I was ready for what would happen next. They were left with nothing. And I was about to find out just how far they would go to make me pay for my freedom. Stay tuned for the final part, where everything finally comes crashing down. You won't want to miss it. 2 days later, the knock came. It wasn't a heavy, aggressive pounding like before. It was frantic, desperate. I knew they were coming for me. They had nowhere else to turn, and in their eyes, I was still the person who could fix everything. But I had already made my decision. I opened the door to find Ryan standing there, his suit even more wrinkled than before. His tie was hanging loosely around his neck, and his face was pale, exhausted. Megan stood behind him, her eyes wide, still cold. And my mother, she was in her transport chair, the oxygen tank sputtering as if it were gasping for life. They looked so small, so fragile in that moment. They had nothing left. The house had been sold at a loss to cover the debts. Ryan and Megan had filed for divorce 3 months later. Turns out, Megan's commitment to the family brand didn't extend to living in poverty. She had left him in the dust the moment it all crumbled. They were standing in front of me, broken. My mother wheezed slightly, her face flushed with a mix of shame and confusion. I felt nothing for them. Not pity, not anger, not even relief. Just quiet. Ryan stepped forward, his voice shaky. We need help. We don't have anywhere else to go. His hands were outstretched, as if he was asking for mercy. Mom's not well. She needs her medication. Please, just help us, Lauren. We'll fix everything later. We'll make it right. I looked at him, at them all. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was just done. I turned to the small table by the door where I had prepared for this moment. I picked up the folder, walked back to Ryan, and handed it to him. He opened it slowly, and I watched as his face drained of color. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a reinstatement of the payments. It wasn't a lifeline. It was a spreadsheet. Every single bill they had used me to cover. Every mortgage payment, every pharmacy copay, every utility bill. And at the bottom, bold and underlined in black ink, $110,000. Ryan's mouth moved, but no words came out. He looked from the paper to me, back to the paper again. He was searching for some kind of mistake, some way to change the narrative. But there was no mistake. This was the price of their comfort, the comfort they had enjoyed while I silently paid for everything they didn't have to see. I know many of you have been in situations where you've been taken advantage of, where the weight of others' demands felt impossible to carry. How did you handle it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you've been in a toxic situation, remember, you don't have to bear the weight alone anymore. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and taking back control of your life. Ryan was still staring at the number, his mouth agape. But there was no error. No explanation to offer. No, I'm sorry to make it all go away. It was what it was. I finally broke the silence. I looked at my mother, her hand still clutching her blanket. Dad didn't leave you a pension. He left you with debt and a foreclosure notice 5 years ago. I was the pension. I was the legacy. I was the one paying for everything. The silence was thick, suffocating. My mother's face crumpled. She stared at me, like I was a stranger, as if the truth had just broken her in ways she couldn't understand. I wasn't going to make excuses for her. I wasn't going to tell her it was okay, or that I had done it out of love. Because, in reality, I hadn't been giving out of love. I had been giving because I was afraid to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. I had let myself become invisible so they could keep pretending everything was fine. But no more. I turned to Ryan and handed him a second piece of paper, another list. This time, it wasn't debts. It wasn't bills. It was a list of state-subsidized care facilities within a 50-mile radius. I placed it in his hands with the spreadsheet. Since you're the man of the house now, I said, my voice steady, you'll need to make some calls. I stepped back and closed the door without waiting for a response. No drama. No yelling. Just silence. The silence of something finally breaking. I wasn't the foundation anymore. I wasn't the one holding everything up. And the thing about foundations? When you take them out, the whole house collapses. They learned that the hard way. But I was free. And that was the beginning of something new. The fallout from that day was predictable. The house was sold. Ryan and Megan, well, they fell apart. My mother moved into a state-subsidized facility, and for the first time in a long while, she was well taken care of. I made sure of that. But I didn't visit. I didn't let myself get pulled back into their web of need. I wasn't going to set myself on fire to keep them warm anymore. I'm sitting in my apartment now. The thermostat is set to 72 degrees. On the counter, there's a high-end espresso machine, a luxury I denied myself for years because I was too busy paying for someone else's roof. It hums quietly as it brews. The sound is soothing, a small but significant reminder of how far I've come. I take a sip, and it tastes like freedom. For the first time in my life, I'm not the foundation. I'm just a person standing in the sun, finally warm. If you've ever set yourself on fire to keep others warm, I want you to know something: you don't have to anymore. You deserve to be warm, too. And to anyone who's ever felt invisible, like their contributions didn't matter, or that they were only valued for what they could give, take this story as a reminder. You matter. Your worth is not in what you can sacrifice for others. It's in who you are. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever been in a similar situation, I'd love to hear from you. Please share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your life and standing your ground.